Hey there, welcome back to the channel. This week we're talking about an American horror story that is so bizarre, unbelievable, and just plain weird. It has me feeling like this is one of the creepiest cases I've ever discussed on the channel. And I've discussed some pretty creepy cases. This is the story of John Hamer and the Hex Hollow murder. On September 19, 1928, a man named John Hamer woke up early in his small town of Hex Hollow, Pennsylvania. John was getting ready for what would be a fairly typical day of work. He fed his animals, had breakfast with his family, and got himself ready to head out into the fields. He lived on a farm outside of town with his wife, Mary, and their 3 children. His son, Morris, was 14 years old. His younger son, Claude, was 12, and his daughter, Beulah, was only 9. John was a farmer, but he also spent time trapping animals, hunting and fishing to help make ends meet. It was something he loved doing. So while it was technically work, it didn't feel like it. And so on the morning of September 19th, after sharing a kiss with his wife and telling his kids he'd be home for dinner, John headed out into the woods behind their home with a rifle over his shoulder. The forest was filled with rabbits and squirrels, so it was perfect hunting territory. John set off through the trees and down to the creek, which was where he planned to do most of his hunting. After walking about half a mile from his house, he heard a noise in the trees and took aim. Before long, he had himself a nice, fat squirrel. John should have felt pretty pleased with himself. Hunting was usually peaceful and enjoyable for him, but there was a darkness growing inside him that was starting to make these outings less fun than they used to be. You see, John had become obsessed with a particular animal. For the past few weeks he had been seeing animal bones, animal skulls, and even live animals in the shape of a cat, all resembling his neighbor's wife, Helen Viola. And this wasn't a coincidence, at least in John's mind. John believed that Helen was using witchcraft to turn herself into these animals and stalk him. Not only that, he was certain she was cursing him and making him go insane. John believed that she was responsible for his insomnia, his lack of appetite, and the strange voices he was hearing in his head. And he was sure that if he didn't stop her, she would drive him completely crazy. In fact, he'd already tried to stop her. Just 2 days prior, he had confronted Helen, telling her he knew she was a witch and demanding she tell him what she had done. She, of course, told him he was out of his mind and demanded he leave. This only made him more convinced that she was a witch. If she wasn't a witch, why did she look like a cat? Why did she hiss at him? And why did she try to run away? So, as John stood there in the woods with his rifle, thinking about how he was going to kill Helen, he heard a sound that sent shivers down his spine. He turned around and saw what looked like a large black cat staring at him from atop a log. It looked intelligent, malevolent, and evil. John aimed his rifle at the cat and shot it dead. Then he walked up to the dead animal, rolled it over, and stared in disbelief. What he thought was a cat was actually his dog. And not just any dog, mind you, his own hunting dog, the one that he had named Spot. Now, perhaps if he hadn't been so convinced that his neighbor was a witch, this would have been the point where he realized he was having a psychotic episode. But John figured that Helen had taken the form of his dog and killed it, so now he needed to find her and finish the job. He grabbed his dead dog and threw it over his shoulder, then ran as fast as he could toward his neighbor's house. When he arrived, he could see Helen standing on the porch. "Get off my land, you dirty witch!" he screamed. "I know you killed my dog." Helen, of course, was very scared. She asked him what he was talking about and demanded he leave. But John was having none of it. He began shooting at her, emptying his rifle into the woman's chest. When he was done, she was kneeling on the porch steps, blood pouring out of her as she looked up at him in disbelief. John dropped his rifle and rushed over to Helen. "You're a dirty witch!" he screamed, punching her in the face over and over again. He kept punching her until his hand was sore and bloody. But Helen still lived, so John grabbed her by the hair, pulled her off the steps, and dragged her deeper into his neighbor's yard. There, he began digging a hole in the ground with his bare hands. He put Helen's body in it, covered it with dirt and leaves, and fled the scene. As soon as he got back home, he told his wife that he had killed a witch, then immediately left the house again and went to find his sons. He told them the same thing. "I just killed a witch," he said proudly. The boys were terrified, but before they could say anything, John grabbed his rifle and headed back to his neighbor's house. He figured he should get rid of the evidence. As he entered the house, he found Helen's 2 children, 8-year-old Helen and 6-year-old Edward, sitting in a room together. They were playing with a doll and singing a song. "Good morning, children," John said with a smile. "How are you today?" "We're fine, Mr. Homer," Helen replied, looking up at him with innocence. But when she saw the blood on his clothes, her eyes widened. John smiled, knowing that she already knew what had happened to her mother. "Do you want to see a dead witch?" he asked. The children nodded, and he took them outside to the freshly dug grave. It was at this point that John's mental state became too much to ignore. Anyone who interacted with him knew that something was wrong. He was acting like a man possessed. It wouldn't be long before he was arrested, but whether or not he would ever be released depended on the jury believing that he had actually killed a witch. The prosecution's case against John was strong, but the defense was stronger. John's lawyers claimed that he was innocent by reason of insanity. And, to be honest, everyone agreed. John clearly suffered from some kind of mental breakdown and killed his neighbor in a fit of rage. But as the trial went on, people began to believe that John was actually onto something. See, in a small town like Hex Hollow, gossip spread fast, and as the trial progressed, stories began emerging about Helen. People began talking about how she had been acting strangely for months, how she kept to herself, and how she seemed angry at John for no reason. One witness even testified that she had seen Helen performing what looked like witchcraft rituals in the woods near John's house. Suddenly, John wasn't the crazy person in the courtroom. He was the victim, and Helen was the witch. But that didn't mean he wasn't guilty. In the end, John was convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 20 to 40 years in prison. He would later be paroled, but he was never the same. He suffered from severe mental health problems for the rest of his life. But perhaps he was right. Maybe Helen was a witch. What do you think happened in this case? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great night, and I'll see you next time.